Hi everybody, and welcome to Race on Main Street. Thank you for being here. We appreciate you, the audience out there. Thank you. I'm your host, Scott Race, and we have a great show planned for you today. We'll be speaking in a little while with Brian Offner from Credit Mindset, and he's going to have lots of great information for you about the whole world of credit. But before we get started, I just want to say hello and introduce my co-host and business partner from Philadelphia Retirement Alliance, and I guess most importantly, my brother, Stuart Race. Stu, welcome. How are things going today?
Scott, it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, it always is. I guess before we get started, I just wanted to say a quick thank you to Stu and to my sister-in-law, Betsy, last night. It was pretty interesting. My daughter, my sister-in-law rather, is a pediatrician, and my daughter all of a sudden feels like there's a problem, and as we're trying to talk her off the roof of rushing her to the emergency room because of her being so anxious about something she ate, Betsy came to the rescue, Aunt Betsy.
Good old Aunt Betsy.
Yep, and talked her off the roof, so to speak, and got her back up on her feet, so and then off the bed. So it was a very, very thankful phone call.
It was certainly my pleasure to hand the phone to Betsy when the phone call came in.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So, well, I hope you're ready for a great show. We have a terrific show for you. As I mentioned, Brian Offner from Credit Mindset is going to be here in a few minutes to talk about some issues related to credit and the Main Street American, the middle class world, and the effects of credit, good and bad, on that population of people. But before we get started, let's talk a little bit about really what Race on Main Street is and how it's all come about. So not that long ago, Stuart, you and I had the privilege of being on another TV show, Money Matters, and they had talked to us about, the idea of helping Main Street America, middle class America, and the host of the show, Charlie Shields, had said, hey, thank you guys. You guys are doing a great service providing information to retirement, regarding retirement, to a population of people who are really worthy of it and certainly need the help. Yeah. And he specifically talked about sort of the super wealthy having, they have tons of resources and the ability to
take care of themselves.
It's all sort of there for them. And he also talked about and stressed the idea of folks who are a little bit less fortunate, where there are programs in place, assistance programs
to help.
To help them, right, to be able to assist them in their day-to-day as they need it. But who's out there for the middle class, that Main Street America, as we talk about, the folks that we work with each and every day. And as a result of that, we thought we need to, or wouldn't it be a great idea to create a platform, a stage for middle-class business owners and Main Street America, in terms of business, really, to be able to come out, talk about what they do, how they're involved in that community, and as they move forward, how they're able to help sort of prop up that community of people.
I think the concept was that nobody in that Main Street middle-class area is necessarily looking for a handout, but if we could maybe do something to make things a little bit easier,
right,
that would be a good thing, and that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, and really through information, through education, that's really what we think, or what we see Main Street middle class America is really hungry for. They take to it, they understand it, they're willing to wrap their heads around it and really help improve their position, all the way around. So it's a great thing. Which
really brings us to today, because we're going to have Brian Offner on later, and he's going to talk about credit mindset and the solutions that they help people with. So credit is certainly a Main Street issue right now, particularly in circumstances when we find, you and I always talk about buzzwords, and we talk about a credit crunch or a credit crisis. And the idea that it's not necessarily something that only affects super wealthy business owners, let's say. It really has quite a trickle-down effect, because what is a credit crisis? A credit crisis or a credit crunch takes place when banks or financial, lenders find circumstances where they're not necessarily looking at the creditworthiness of the people that they're lending to in the way they did at a prior time, because something has happened with regard to bad investments or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it really is an issue. And when you look at it from what I'm going to call the top down, so the lending to businesses, and then how it filters down, or rather the lack of lending maybe to businesses from a credit crunch type standpoint, how it then filters down to this population of people. And we talked about it today,
Sure.
where if you had business X who's looking to hire 25 people, okay, very often they're going to do that as a result of the credit sources they have.
Sure.
So if those credit sources aren't there, what happens to those 25 people?
Right. Well, that business X, I mean, that you're talking about, that's looking for a credit situation where they're going to ask for a certain amount of money that's going to allow them to enlarge their business in a way that allows them to hire new people. But it also even comes before that, because that same business X has vendor relationships. And they may be in a circumstance where they've got to pay their vendors every 60 days. And their vendor may come to them at some point and say, look, we're on a crunch, so we can only give you a 30-day window. And given that circumstance, that's going to affect cash flow. So it's not necessarily even a situation where a business is going to a lender and saying, I need to borrow money. It's a situation where a business is just trying to do business as usual, but their cash flow has been severely impacted in a negative way that creates a circumstance that doesn't allow them to continue to operate at the level that they were operating prior.
So really it's affecting them on more than one level, that's for sure.
Sure.
And who does it ultimately bottom line hurt? Hurts the business, certainly, but those 25 additional people that I always think of,
sure.
that could have had great employment, now all of a sudden are either looking elsewhere, unemployed, or having some kind of issue where maybe a few years back that wouldn't have been the case, because these issues weren't as prevalent. And now all of a sudden we're looking at a circumstance where fewer people are employed, maybe they're employed at a lower financial level, and all of a sudden all of the rippling effect that this has on there. We talk about, our family from time to time, Race on Main Street, and Dad used to always say to me, when you light a match here in America, as little as it might have an impact on somebody in China, it still does. That whole idea of that rippling effect of one event here is going to affect so many people, even from a great distance away.
Sure.
But when you have it in a circumstance where it's right home here in the region, you feel it that much more.
Well, you do feel it that much more, and you want to talk about the focus on Main Street. I used to try to teach my kids, Economics 101, which is kind of an interesting situation at a dinner table with a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. But the concept of those 25 people, let's say, or even the people that are working at the business at the current time that have to take a pay cut or something like that, that guy, he doesn't have the money to buy the pizza on Friday night, and therefore the pizza guy doesn't get paid. So the pizza guy can't go to the movie theater, and the movie theater guy can't join the gym, and the gym guy can't do whatever. So it's really, the effect on the global economy is certainly there, but I think what's even more prevalent and what's more focused on the audience that we're trying to speak to and prop up a little bit is that inner community kind of situation. So a credit crunch is not just about companies that are too big to fail failing.
Right.
It's about the people who live on Main Street and their daily lives.
Yeah, and I think that one of the items that you have to factor into there is you talk about business, big business versus small business, community business, things like that. There's as many people employed by what we're going to call small business,
Sure,
as there are of the large mega, international corporations in this country. So that piece, that credit piece that's so important to keeping really money flowing, cash flow going in order for some level of expansion, whatever it might be. Sometimes it means buying maybe a new fleet of cars or a new building or stationery or supplies, expanding the market, and then hiring new people. All of those items are greatly impacted. So
they are.
So where are we headed today with Brian and credit mindset and the idea of credit and how it affects people and how they can put themselves in a better spot?
Well, let's talk about the solutions that people on Main Street are looking to people like Brian. Our guest Brian Offner is here today from Credit Mindset. Brian, first of all, I want to say thank you for being here because I know time is money.
No, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
It's a pleasure. So before we get into Credit Mindset and some of the different ways in which Credit Mindset helps the people that we're talking about, why don't you just give us a minute, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate it, guys. First off, thanks for having me. I do appreciate it. A little bit about myself. Penn State grad, graduated from Penn State with a degree in Human Development and Family Studies, which I focused on mostly behavioral health was kind of my passion. Went and worked in the corporate world for a while, and then I decided to delve into the mortgage world back at a time where it was probably maybe not the greatest decision to be getting into the mortgage industry in 2006. But at that time is when I kind of started realizing there's this correlation between behavioral studies and financial management. So I kind of started drawing these correlations of, there's a lot of good people out there that are either misinformed, miseducated, or just mismanaging, their finances. So that allowed, me to kind of look for an opportunity to help that aspect. More on a personal note, as you guys know, I just recently had my first baby girl, September 10th. So
beautiful little girl.
Everyone tells you, it's going to change your life, and you're just kind of waiting, and then boom, sure enough, it happened. So found a whole new kind of perspective, which is really neat. It's really really excited. And my wife Lynette has been very supportive, and it's been a lot of fun.
Wonderful.
How many baby girls did you have?
I have 3.
House full of women at Stu's house.
So enjoy the circumstance. Yes, you will.
Definitely.
You will become expert in things that you had no idea even existed.
I can see that already.
But circling back to let's talk about that miseducation. Let's start there.
Yeah, I want to say, miseducation also. Lack of education. I went to Penn State, and I joke all the time with my clients that I've skipped a lot of classes in school, but never one that was Credit 101. It doesn't exist. They're not teaching it in schools. They're not teaching how to manage your credit profile. They're teaching checkbooks and kind of giving big picture kind of economics, but they're not dialing it down to the way you manage your money. The behaviors you create are a direct reflection of this score that's going to follow you and be such a crucial part of not only obtaining financing, but getting a job, what rates you pay. There's so many factors that credit plays a role, whether you're able to even get an interview or get into an apartment complex, or there's just so many areas that insurance is another one, where your credit kind of factors in. So
it's interesting that you say that about school. And Brian, you and I have had these conversations in the past about credit, where you're at school, college, that furthering your education at a pretty advanced level, and you talk about credit. And what's one of the biggest things that affects college students is their student loans. But yet there's really very, very little information. I remember in school, and I too am a Penn State graduate, and I remember going, and to the extent that they taught us about student loans, and you talk about credit, was a 10-minute video that we watched that basically said, make sure when you graduate, you pay back your loans. And that was really sort of the message behind it. But beyond that, maybe there were other things I could have searched out, but there wasn't anything obvious.
Yeah, let's call it like it is. College is a business, right? If we're, it's for another show, but my personal, guiding people through that, college is a business first. They develop relationships and partnerships with banks, They don't allow it anymore, which is great, but you used to see credit card companies just inundate the college campuses. And the joke again is I left Penn State with 2 MBA t-shirts and 10 grand in credit card debt because But think of that. I didn't even have a job. I'm applying for student loans. You don't have the money because you're just going to school, but here's credit cards. Figure it out. Go figure out how to manage all of this with no job. Like, it just doesn't make sense to be lending money.
But you got an umbrella.
You got an umbrella, a couple pens. I think at the time I was able to get a cell phone. This is a long time ago. But we're basically setting people up. We were setting people up to fail. And by not educating them on proper money management, what this credit score is all about, I still do see so many kids come out of college so handicapped financially because they did what people told them they were supposed to be doing.
But it's not necessarily all about the student loans. I mean, that's, like you say, that's sort of a subject for another show.
Yeah, student loans to me, it's what you consider good debt. You see student loans on the credit report, you defer them until you have a job and you pay them. That's like no big deal, pay the student loans.
Right.
Now there's we could do a whole show on default student loans right now. That's a huge issue. But that comes down to a lot of things you guys talked about. This college is selling you on the idea that out of college you're going to get a high-paying job and the loans aren't going to be an issue. Well, that doesn't exist because the Main Street America business owner, that small business owner, is so tight that he can't expand. He can't offer new jobs to people to have those entry-level positions like they used to, so that people can afford their student loan payments, afford a car, afford kind of what we would consider a very middle-class lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So then how did Credit Mindset, you talk about these issues that come with it, how did it get started? I see why it got started, but give us some history as to how it got started and give us its roots and then what it's expanded to at this point.
Yeah, in 2006 I started Credit Mindset. I was at my desk as a mortgage banker. I left the corporate world. I wanted to get into the mortgage arena. About a year into being a mortgage banker, I started just noticing a certain clientele base, credit score driven, that was kind of just being thrown off to the side. Like your subprime market had just gone away. So they basically say, these people, we're not helping them anymore. We're done with them. So I figured out a way, well, why not help them? They're good people too. And there's been a huge stereotype of what somebody with bad credit looks like. At least there was, and that viewpoint has changed. It used to be a couple taboo things, right? Like a DUI was taboo. You didn't want to talk about it. Getting divorced, you didn't want to talk about it. Those things have all kind of manifested to being like, oh, I know a couple people that have all of that. And then the credit back in 2006 was the same thing. You didn't want to talk about having bad credit. Only certain people had bad credit, people that mismanaged their money, but it doesn't discriminate based off of anything as far as income levels. I've seen it all. So I developed a program to help people who are motivated take themselves from position A to position B, which is improve their overall credit profile, through education, through teaching them the behaviors that are required to take you from here to there. It's a learned behavior. Some people instinctually have that. Some people are, it's almost personality types too. Most people, if they're making money, pay their bills. It's not like a matter of like, I have all this money and I just don't want to pay you, which negatively affects your credit. You don't see that very often. It's more of a situational, helping someone through a situation or a time in their life where their credit got beat up, and then you're helping them recover and get back onto a new plan.
So this is not really just about fixing somebody's credit score. It's well beyond that, because you talked about a couple of very important items there, either changing or helping them to change a behavior. You started off with a behavioral piece that I'm a behavioral guy. I learned about behavioral activities. Now all of a sudden there are folks that fall into this category for whatever reason. Their credit is a little bit beat up, and now all of a sudden it's, in some cases, it's a bad event that may have caused that, but in other instances it's behavioral modification.
100%. In counseling, there's a type of behavioral counseling that I always gravitated towards, which was systems theory, which meant you can't fix one person and put them back in a dysfunctional system and expect them to change the system, right? So take a husband who's got bad spending habits and put them, and fix him and put him back into, the wife has bad spending habits and expect him to fix the whole family, finances. It's a group effort. And so whether I'm dealing with an individual or a family, you really have to get everybody who's an influence on this individual to help them really change the behaviors that got them here in the first place, and or that they're not aware of, that they need to implement different management styles and recognize what behaviors are getting them in trouble. And the one thing, just like in counseling, you kind of identify, in the credit world, I've kind of identified two types of credit challenge individuals. You have situational and you have habitual, right? So your habitual is somebody that just, over time just has bad behaviors. They don't pay people, and for whatever reason. It could be just lack of income, in and out of jobs, and it's just very habitual. And then you have situational, where someone was good up to a certain point, had a life event happen. You see this all the time: a divorce, loss of job, death in the family. I mean, insert any major life event that an income takes a hit, the credit is usually affected by that. So then they're good. So we're going up, your situational, we're going and cleaning up just a certain time frame to help them get back on their feet. So you have to recognize, one, who you're dealing with, where the issues stem from, much like in counseling, and get to the root of the issue, and then draw them a roadmap. So you're here, we're going to get you to here, and here's the plan to do it, and hold their hand along the way. And that's how we do it.
How is there a time frame? Like, how long does something like that? I mean, the habitual guy, you need to fix something that's more deep-seated.
Correct, and there's a lot of external factors that, as far as what we do, we can help them develop the behaviors and the focus and an awareness of what that path looks like. Almost create like a paradigm shift. I didn't know, now I know, and now when I fall off, I have to grab myself and put myself back on the right path. They're aware. Now, factors like employment, amount of income, controlling their expenses, that all falls on them to manage that piece. But you definitely get different protocols or strategies for each client that you want to implement.
And what kind of, like, when somebody goes through this, somebody has, let's say, a situational event, and their credit takes a hit, and as we talk to people, we work with folks, helping them plan for their retirement. Sure. We hear about these issues all the time, especially over the last 5 or 6 years, pretty regularly. Mm-hmm. So somebody has this issue. The issue is now, the fire's now out, and they're getting back on their feet, and their credit score goes from, let's just say it was a pretty solid credit score of 750. We hear these numbers, okay? And now all of a sudden it's, and I don't know if this is a correct assessment, but it's now 600, 580, something much lower than 750.
Right.
But they're on the right path now. They're on the right track. How long does it take for them to sort of get things back moving in the right direction? Is it going to take them 3 years to get back to that 750 mark? Is it going to take them 6 months? What's the process, and how does it typically work for someone who's, again, not a habitual offender, but somebody who's now beyond the problem, who's looking to make these changes?
That's a great question. Each person's roadmap is different. So I kind of use this analogy. It really depends on where you're looking to get to. Are you looking to get back to 750? It's kind of like, I use this analogy, like everybody could run a marathon, right? As long as you're able-bodied, you could train and run a marathon. Now, everybody, depending on what kind of shape you're in, everyone's going to be able to run that marathon either next month, next week, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, next year, right? So that's kind of, it depends on what kind of shape you're coming to us in to basically say, what's your goal? We'll set the time frame. When I look at a credit report, I use kind of a school analogy where I say, look, I'm looking for what I call bad test grades. You have good test grades and you have bad test grades, and that comes up with your average, right? Our program, in essence, plays teacher. We're going to work on getting rid of as many bad test grades as possible, leveraging the laws that are put in place to protect the consumers. The Fair Credit Reporting Act says the bureaus have to have supporting documentation for everything they're reporting. So without getting into the details of how we do what we do, that's the laws that we leverage to work on getting items, bad test grades, either updated or removed off their credit report. We average about a 38 to 42% deletion rate. So we know if they have 10 negative trade lines, 10 bad test grades, you can get 3 to 5 of those items removed off. Well, if a teacher drops 3 of your Fs, what's your average doing?
Yeah, it's going
going
up pretty
right?
good.
So we, on average, see about a 50 to 100 point jump in the credit scores in 60 days. But it's key. The most important component of that is teaching them how to add A's into their average. So you ask time frame, think of a conveyor belt today going back 2 years, your credit score, right? This conveyor belt, everything on that conveyor belt is highly impacting your score. That's the most impactful, the 2 years. As it falls off the conveyor belt, it becomes less impactful. So what we want to do is teach our clients and work on getting items that are on the conveyor belt either updated or removed, even items that have fallen off the conveyor belt, getting those updated and removed, and then helping them put new positive stuff on the front of this conveyor belt, which will greatly change individuals' behavior. Just kind of give you real quick my story. When I was a mortgage banker, I pulled my credit, found, and you'll see that on the website, kind of a little bit about my story, how I pulled my credit coming out of college. I didn't know anything. I went to get a laptop at Best Buy, and they turned me down for credit. So I was like, all right, here, I'll use my debit card, and I paid for it. It just had me thinking, wow, you guys won't give me $1,100 to buy a laptop, but I can give you the money now to pay for it. Something just didn't feel right about it. So that's really what started this whole thing with credit mindset of like, let me figure out what I have to do to play their game and get myself in a position to secure financing. And just with doing some research, it turned out I had a 519 credit score, which is awful. So it's not good. So I put myself through what is now my program, went from a 519 to a 626. And then I did some other strategies that we teach our clients and went from a 626 to a 694 in 6 months. So I went from this you're judging me at Best Buy, and I'm the same guy 6 months later, and now you'll give me the line of credit because I did a little bit of homework and manipulated and educated myself on this number that you're judging me by. Well, a lot of people don't know that's available.
So really what it comes down to is credit mindset is going to help a couple of main things, really clean up that credit score, but as probably as important, if not more important, create an educational system for you to be able to create a circumstance where you're fixing the problem internally ongoing. It's this change of behavior that allows you to be able to move in the right direction, not just for one day, but for the rest of your life. And that's a pretty important item. Now, there's lots of valuable information on the Credit Mindset website, and I know Brian has alluded to that. So if you just go for some more educational details to www.creditmindset.com, there's lots of educational pieces about that. So I just wanted to finish up with a quick piece here. We talk about a little bit away from credit, but just about the idea of money in the community. I had met with not too long ago somebody at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and we were talking about the influences of finances in the area, and he said this very interesting thing to me. I want to leave everybody with this. I don't know if it's true. I'm going to assume what they told me is accurate, that the Philadelphia Art Museum, okay, this great cultural place, brings in more money to the region than all of the Philadelphia sports teams combined, okay? Pretty impactful if you think about it. So I guess the message to it is, hey, make sure while you're supporting all the teams and the Eagles this weekend, don't forget the Art Museum, and have a great week. Next week on, we will be speaking with Don Solomon from Solomon Associates. He's going to be talking about issues related to family law, so we look forward to having him here. Brian, we'd like to thank you for coming out and talking about these credit issues. I know they could go on for quite some time because of how complicated it is, but I think the education that you provided is going to be very helpful to a lot of people. So thank you. We appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
I guess that's the final word. And just if everybody would tune in next week.